Okay. Yeah. I was
okay. At school, I wasn't very happy academically. Great disappointment to my father, who was fairly academic, and I was interested in things that we didn't study at school, painting and music. My father had quite a lot of records. I suppose first half of the 20th century really is what he liked. He had been a pianist himself, and just sort of playing turn of the 19th century music of Les Six, Milo and Ravel and so on. But he also liked Mozart. My mother liked Mozart and Monteverdi, so that was the basic stuff. Benjamin Britten, Vaughan Williams as well. But then there was a whole bunch of stuff that I really liked. I think for some reason it's quite common for jazz people. What the non-jazz they like, sometimes it surprises classical musicians. We all seem to love Bartók for some reason, and I actually knew chunks of the famous Bartók violin concerto, da 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 da. All that with a brum 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 brum, wonderful intro and stuff like that. So that was there. And then but my father had seen a film called Stormy Weather, in which he'd seen Fats Waller playing and thought what an astonishing pianist he was. And so he did like jazz. And then once on a radio programme called The Third Programme, which was the forerunner of Radio 3 in England, that plays classical music and does a few plays, they had something where they actually presented a record, which is very rare, just one record, a programme about it, which was Duke Ellington's Such Sweet Thunder, which was an adaptation of Shakespearean ideas, themes, characters for sort of suites. I now know largely written, you can tell, with Billy Strayhorn, wonderful pianist and arranger that Duke Ellington worked with by the mid-50s. And my father approved of this. He liked the whiff of Shakespeare. And I loved it too. And so that really did it. And then as a boy, I would be sent abroad a bit, and I went to Paris to stay because it was a way of children, they could have holidays which you didn't have to pay for if you did an exchange with the children of another family. So Pierre Vignal came to stay with us, and I went to stay with him in Rue de Rennes, Paris. And anyway, sometime during that period I saw Ascenseur pour l'échafaud, Lift to the Scaffold, and heard Miles Davis with Barney Willen and Kenny Clarke on drums. And in particular, there's a fast piece which I bought the record, and I didn't really understand what they were talking about, so I just listened to the music, and I listened to Kenny Clarke on that, who I just thought was wonderful. Kenny Clarke on brushes, and I'd never heard anything so fluid and beautiful as that. And I still think Kenny Clarke is crucial, because he lifted it out of the kind of thing into a kind of fluid dang thing, and so evened up the beats. And once you've done that, you can go to Elwyn Jones and onwards. So I'm exaggerating, but really that's what it seemed like. I hadn't heard that much, but then I heard I don't know where I saw it, but I heard the film by the Italian-American filmmaker John Cassavetes called Shadows, which had music improvised by Charles Mingus and Curtis Porter, who was known as Shafi Hadi, on alto saxophone, and I think Danny Richmond. And the other drummer who really, as always, seemed to be incredibly underestimated is Danny Richmond. I know he's famous, but he's wonderful. He's just wonderful. And I would absolutely, people talk these days about drum and bass and stuff like that, and I just go, well, Charlie Mingus and Charles Mingus and Danny Richmond, that's drum and bass to me. I mean, just wonderful. The time shifting and so on, it was quite difficult to follow. They would go into the implied 6/8 over a 4 and all kind of stuff going on. So those particular experiences kind of got to me like nothing at school had done, no classical music had done, not even Bartok. The one that I think first really hit me with Sonny Murray, maybe the first I heard, was actually called a Gil Evans record, Into the Hot, in which because he had a contract to make a record and hadn't got enough material, he handed over to a couple of arrangers that he liked, and one of them was Cecil Taylor, who had a band with, I can't remember, would it have been Rothwell Rudd or someone, and Archie Shepp, was it? I can't remember exactly. I haven't got it, unfortunately. I'd love to have it again. But so Sonny Murray plays on that, and it's a wonderful thing the way he plays. It's like films of the sea, where you can see the tide coming in. There's a kind of surging to it, but it's not metronomic. And it struck me as really, really organic, you know. And so it had a kind of momentum that you want. It was jazz because it had that momentum and the pulse, but it wasn't identifiable, you know, in terms of the normal geometric patterns of jazz. And I just found it really moving, like a kind of a cross between the wind and somebody actually breathing, you know, as if nature was a living, breathing thing through him. That was my feeling. Not immediately, no. I was when I started out trying to play drums, I mean, just thinking about what I was listening to, not what I could play. I mean, the context was, when I started working, apart from rehearsing, was playing for dance bands. And I was listening, my favourite drummers for dancing were the New Orleans drummers, whose names I'm ashamed to say I don't really know, but I listened to Alan Toussaint records and all that, ka-doom, bop, ka-boom, bop, and all those kind of Bo Diddley rhythms, dong, ka-gong, ka-dong, ka-gong, gong, and all that stuff, which you can hear in early New Orleans music. So that stuff, and then, I listened to quite old-fashioned rock drummers are, actually, funny enough. They're very old-fashioned in their taste. They're the only people left who still like Buddy Rich, you know what I mean? I don't, but I did like Louis Bellson a lot, and because of the Ellington connection. Some wonderful Louis Bellson stuff, and then Shelley Mann with Ornette Coleman actually was fantastic, and with Sonny Rollins, and of course with their own bands. But hearing him being pushed to that by people like Ornette and Sonny Rollins is fantastic. And I think Billy Higgins sort of comes from that. He played a lot on the West Coast and had some of that. There's a very nice Sonny Rollins record where he sort of basically played with the Ornette Coleman quartet of the time. Really, it's him and Don Cherry. I can't remember. Was it in bass? Would it be Reggie Workman? Somebody I can't remember, I'm afraid. And Billy Higgins, where Billy Higgins just plays bananas. I mean, he's just really, really funny and silly. It's like Lewis Carroll drumming. It's like it's very witty, and there just seems to be anything he couldn't do. So I was very influenced by Billy Higgins. Funnily enough, playing with Sonny Rollins, where paradoxically enough, he plays much freer than he did with Ornette Coleman, because Ornette Coleman likes to keep a steady bounce going. He's quite old-fashioned with me. And Ed Blackwell did an enormously wonderful, influential drum solo on an Ornette record called Ornette, with that bass player who ended up with Bill Evans, you know, Charlie Hayden, Scott LaFaro, and Don Cherry on trumpet of some sort. And but there's a solo which is really just a tune, and then a Ed Blackwell feature, and that was totally wonderful to me because it had a kind of very old-fashioned rumbling New Orleans thing, almost like Baby Dolls, but kept going sort of out of phase and then coming back in again in an extraordinary way. So all these people affected what I listened to, and they were more appropriate than anything as fluid as Sonny Murray for what the kind of music we were doing, which was pop music, where you just sort of broke the dam and went off and improvised on the basis of some kind of pop song. And for the kind of rhythms we were playing, and in the kind of early rock context we were playing in, it was these kind of very rather dramatic kinds of drumming, you know, very, very clear, sharp distinctions between the different parts of the kit, the hi-hat, the bass drum, the tom, and so on. And it was only, in fact, when I did this record, The End of an Ear, really, that I started trying to, not all of it, but there's parts of it where I'm just trying to really working on that fluidity, where it's sort of almost seamless, the flow from the snare to the cymbals, and where everything just sounds like it's part of one sort of stew. And so it's really not till then, and I would have probably liked to have developed that more, but obviously I had to stop drumming in about 1973. I don't know what I would have done with it after that. But it was quite late on that I was able to incorporate anything, really, of Sonny Murray's. But it was always there as an ideal, because the trouble with the drum kit is that each part of the drum kit has a completely different sound. Obviously a hi-hat, a bass drum, tom-tom, so on. It's quite, so it's very kind of stark, you know, boom, bang, psh, all this. And what Sonny Murray did, more than anybody, more than Elvin Jones was pushing it that way as well, was make it into a single fluid organic whole. And it's very hard to do. It ain't half hard. Because, you know, first of all, that each instrument has a different volume to it. You hit one hard and it's going to be much louder than another. Secondly, you know, your extremities are doing this. It's not like a close-fingered thing, or, you know, and to sort of measure the pressure you're putting on hands and feet and the movements across, and to get some sort of way of keeping a flow going while you're moving around. I still don't think anybody's matched how Sonny Murray has mastered that. Musicians sometimes have ideas in their head that motivate them, but it doesn't necessarily resonate the way they meant it to the people listening to them. Nor should they get cross if it doesn't, really. It's really not a musician's business what other people get out of what they do. You know, they can't get grumpy about it. It might, if people, I think it's a personal decision that what these things mean to you according to your own life. I'm impatient with the idea of music as a cultural force, as a catalyst. I see it as a response to political events, or part, you know, as all culture is, you know, as is conformity. But also I would say that it's by no means clear that revolutionary artists have revolutionary sensibilities. There are quite a few extremely conservative revolutionary artists, Schoenberg, to Andy Warhol, really, I mean, Jack Kerouac, all seem to end up Catholics or something. I mean, what do you know, eh? Who would think it? And even great musical revolutionaries like Ornette Coleman and Coltrane and Jimi Hendrix were quite sort of evasive on the subject, really, or sort of would blur it with sort of rather Californian-sounding mystical what's-its-names. But so I don't think we can impose on artists or on the public a meaning, really, that could be put in a couple of snappy sentences. But it's just a general tendency of arts to reflect the times they're in and what they've inherited. It's sort of inevitable, really. And paradoxically, what's interesting is arts in a community under siege, and often sharpens the senses. And I was watching a singer from the Arabic community in what is now known as Israel, called Amam Morkus, singing in a little concert in London. And her songs were about occupation and the desire for freedom, but they were about occupation under the Ottoman Empire. They weren't a criticism of the current regime, just talking about the longing of the people of Palestine to be free of colonialism. Well, you couldn't really fault it. You couldn't say, because it was these are historical songs. And this is what artists do. They tend to use analogies and metaphors from the past and so on to sort of get round being able to say things. And that kind of pressure is very interesting, what happens to the arts. And sometimes a degree of censorship or just public disapproval has a very interesting, can be a very interesting catalyst, really. I suppose, like, even if you take in the middle of the 19th century, the incipient avant-garde sort of was a shadow of, or an echo of, or sometimes an anticipation of a political avant-garde. It seemed to accompany a sense of upheaval in social life and politics and so on. And although I think sometimes people in culture and the arts exaggerate their own potential as revolutionaries, I don't think they sort of, you can actually blow the walls of Jericho down by playing trumpets very loud. It just doesn't happen. You know what I mean? But as a sort of cheerleaders of a football match, we can encourage the team. You know what I mean? And so certain revolutionary periods, there's no doubt or it's either that or it's discussed with the conservative status quo. So I think a lot of avant-garde art in Germany in the 30s, for example, was a kind of removing themselves from the kind of kitsch consensus of what art should be like, as a deliberate sort of dissidence, as it were. So those two things, and it came up again, of course, with the struggle of black Americans for equal rights. And it seemed, in the case of black diaspora, very literally, I know that in the case, for example, of Louis Maholo, the South African drummer, that to him, the word freedom covered the lot. It's indissoluble, it's not fragmentable. It means political freedom, it means musical freedom. And it absolutely, not every musician I know, even that worked with him, analysed it with that kind of critical clarity. It's not necessary, musicians don't need to be intellectual analysts. But in that sense, Lewis was very articulate. He knew exactly what he was doing and why he was doing it. He's a very clear example of that. So yes, I think it goes with that. And it's very hard to evoke the zeitgeist at a later period if it hasn't got any political or social equivalent. It then becomes pure aesthetics, which is fine, but that's what it is. There's a lot of discomfort with the word jazz in Europe, and you get people sort of trying to find a way around it, and then you get these titles like the French magazine Impro Jazz, and but that's uncomfortable because it's as if jazz wasn't impro, or I think it's just to kind of rid themselves of the feeling that people like Derek Bailey didn't want to be considered distant colonial remnants of a musical empire, who didn't quite qualify. Because people feel they want to feel at the centre of their own world, not on the fringes of somebody else's. But in reality, I'm quite happy to be just a participant in a world which is music which was set alight by black Americans. I'm quite happy to have I don't see why they can't just take their place, feel they have quite a modest role in that. I mean, it's the first time. It is, after all, the most if you're interested in the concept of avant-garde, to me, artistically, the most avant-garde thing that happened in the 20th century, by which I mean that aspect of the 20th century avant-garde which was totally unpredicted in the 19th century, was this completely extraordinary, massive wave of black American music, one sort or another, popular to the avant-garde. And nobody saw that coming, you know what I mean? Everyone's sort of saying, the future music will do this, aleatory, will go after after Wagner, you have Schoenberg, and then you break up and then you have, go through. But nobody predicted this. And I think it's the most wonderful gift we were all given in the 20th century. And it's the first time in Western history of the European diaspora, that Africans have taken centre stage, Well, I don't think we should begrudge them that, because they've had a hard time, fuck off. I hear sort of disparaging reference to the idea of, we mustn't live in a museum culture and so on, but I love museums, I think they're great. I don't have a problem. I mean, I think that there again, we accept the idea that we've got art museums, we've got the Prado, and that the classical music repertoire is another museum, and we have architecture, and I think we should allow the great explosion of Black American music in the 20th century also to be a hallowed and revered museum, even if there are no more Charlie Parkers. And I don't think we should erase that or airbrush it out. You know what I mean? I think that we should be happy to be regenerated by that, but then go on and do whatever we do, which will inevitably be our own thing. I mean, when I write songs and so on, there's no way I can sing like an American. I tried for a few years, and some people can, but it's just felt silly, me saying baby. How do you say, why do you call girls baby? A baby's a baby, Don't get that. Anyway, so inevitably what I do gets anglicised and informed by what I know, and I don't suppose many Black Americans or people who love Black America would even recognise much of that legacy in what I do. I'm in my 60s. I take refuge in museums. I know that there's a sort of worry about this, but it would be a self-perpetuating problem if people thought of it as that. I mean, for all my fact that I still play Jackie McLean records at least once a week, it hasn't stopped me doing anything I want to do, and none of it's anything like Jackie McLean. I don't see what harm it's doing me. It's just reminding me of how I got into this stuff in the first place. So I wouldn't join in with those musicians who are a bit, feel overburdened by history myself. No. I'd say you should be so lucky to have a history for your music and enjoy it, and this is your moment, do your thing. I mean, I'm surprised how much free music, both modern and of the period, moves me. I mean, I do, one of the reasons I wanted to do this interview was because I'm surprised at the extent to which I still get enormous pleasure from, Sonny Murray, for example, there's a Copenhagen records with what's the name of the alto saxophonist? Oh damn!
Jimmy Lyons.
Jimmy Lyons, that's right, Jimmy Lyons. Quite a Parkerish alto, but Parker without the chords. It's lovely. Just implications there, kind of Parker bird really set free, and with Sonny Murray, and I just love it. And I even love the fact that it's an out-of-tune piano. This is in the great jazz tradition. They had all the posh musicians like detuning pianos and doing their prepared pianos. Jazz musicians don't have to bother, they get given crap pianos anyway. You know what I mean? It's handed you on a plate, So I've got quite a few, Chris McGregor and Cecil Taylor, Thelonious Monk, all playing on crap pianos. They manage it, they just come up with something fresh, and it's it's all part of it somehow. And so that whole bit, but Sonny Murray's playing and thing is a continuous wonder to me, and still, funnily enough, I'm still shocked by the audacity and the courage of what they do, and particularly by the thing that upsets, I suppose, people used to hearing what they know and expect, is the complete disregard for showing people that you can play conventional music. Obviously, something that is projected as iconoclastic, once the icons are broken, then its work is done, as it were. That's all that can mean. But the idea isn't. But that's a too negative. I don't really like the idea of an avant-garde which is simply there to destroy. I think it's a misunderstanding perpetuated both by artists and by fans. You know, the idea that the French call épater la bourgeoisie. You know, just to upset the conservative. It doesn't upset them very much. In fact, they buy all your work probably and own everything you do in about 10 if they think it's a smart move to make. That's what's happened in modern art, visual arts. I reject the definition of avant-garde sensibility as being just aggressive. It might have to be to fight for its corner, but I see, to me, the avant-garde is much. It's about finding beauty where people had only seen ugliness before. About searching for beauty in the world. It's very simple, and it's seeing beauty where people hadn't seen it before, and that's a quest that never ends. And people who find beauty, like Ornette Coleman finding a beauty in the way a saxophone naturally tunes itself if you don't bend it to fit the piano notes, or finding beauty in pianos that aren't tuned properly and making something beautiful out of that. In all the arts, this seems to me a sort of a really noble function that artists perform. And it's life enhancing in the end, and in that sense it's very much what art has always been to me. Well, I did this record, The End of an Era. I feel a bit sorry for, there was a record company, it was called CBS at the time, and I was in a band and they let us each make a solo record, and I think they were hopeful about mine being more commercial than the others because I was a singer and stuff, and had spent years sort of singing pop songs and the like, you know, as a youth, and but I'd already done a sort of extended thing of all the kind of a pop thing stretched to its limits. A thing called End of an Era, a thing called Moon in June already on one of our records, on one side of a record, and I'd sort of done what I could with that idiom for a while with songs. I wanted to stretch out, and in particular, this is maddening thing about drummers, as somebody once said, trouble with drummers is they always want to do something else. I think we get envious of everybody who's got notes and tunes and things. So, and it's true, I wanted to play piano, and so really, the way I like playing it, I wanted to get on record somehow what I was doing at home, and then build it around that, which has turned out to be quite useful for later, although I don't really play like that anymore. And I just took a couple of basic themes that I'd started out with. One was a Gil Evans thing called Las Vegas Tango, which is a kind of blues really, just but a very simple blues bass. There's some lovely versions of it with Elvin Jones on drums and Johnny Coles on trumpet and Lucky Thompson or someone on tenor already, and I just took it as a basis for extended improvisations of the voice and the piano, and I was very concerned with trying to do all the things that I couldn't do in a live context, which was really think how much I can do with a voice, how much I can do with a drum kit, how much I can do with a piano, but just all of them, be like a group where I was all the people in it. But then I got about halfway through, and then I thought, and I got lonely. So I got a couple of the mates I've been working with in a band anyway, just to come and play on some just completely improvised pieces I had on drum kit, and that was it really. And I think CBS were utterly appalled, horrified. But it was a real breakthrough for me as a record. Because even in the band I'd had, although it was considered in rock circles to be a very free band, I found it was a bit like, really, it looked free on the surface, but it was kind of like, you know, before modern gardens and wildlife gardens, the original gardens introduced into Europe were Italian gardens, which are very They're no interest in nature at all. They're geometric patterns, humans asserting their geometric skills onto the chaos of nature. That was the idea. And underneath the band I was in, there was this geometry, rigid geometry, and with Elinor, I just wanted to flood the gates, flood the fences, just wash it and just flow, you know. And this, I suppose, was very influenced. The drumming isn't at all like Sally Murray, but it's very influenced by that attitude from the kind of music that I've been listening to, the improvising musicians we were talking about. Well, I get taken by surprise sometimes. I've got a friend called Jerry Dammers, who's a really terrific musician in England who worked on the two-tone thing, dance music, one of the great periods of British pop music, really, based on Jamaican blue beat music, and doing a sort of cockneyfied, well, English version. He's from Coventry, actually, and but it's very tight stuff, you know. It's very funny, witty, tight, and very, very politically overt, very kind of banner waving stuff, but funny as well. But I've met him more recently, and all he listens to now is he's got this is Sun Ra and so on, and all the alumni from the Sun Ra band. He loves improvised music. He says, how did anybody ever think it's hard? He said it's the easiest music in the world to listen to, because it's just the people playing it and with each other and to you. And he said it's so direct. It's the music with least barriers he's ever come across, and he loves it. You know, this is a man from a very solid, kind of right on, but commercial background, you know. He's just immersed in it now. And you either get it or you don't, you know. You can't tell the public off, you know. It doesn't work, that. It's like getting cross with a girl because she doesn't fancy you. I mean, what's the point? You know, it's not going to make her like you. You know what I mean? I know that Alfie, particularly, my other half, what a funny thing to say. My wife. What's the word for it?
Better half.
My better half. Always enjoyed, you know, like the little theatre club, watching John Stevens and Evan and all the lads playing live. And in fact, would stay at the door collecting what money there was there. Although, as she pointed out, you know, the band usually outnumbered the audience, even when it was only a trio. sometimes even a soloist would outnumber the audience, quite frankly. But that was, I don't think, it didn't bother her, and I think that there again the zeitgeist is quite different, because that is a very post-60s thing to worry about, really, I have to say, because in the days when the romantic images were of some kind of beat culture, the fact that you belonged to a sort of secret culture that had its own language, and where only a few of you recognised each other and knew what you were on about, was a source of pride, you know. You didn't care. You knew straight people could never follow it. Now, they were straight. To hell with them. You didn't care about the public. If they came along, welcome, you know. If they didn't, to hell with it. If you couldn't make enough money doing it, do a day job. You know, they didn't, or steal, or, but I don't know. No, I shouldn't say that, should I? It's like smoking on camera. I wouldn't, you know, shouldn't do these things. But, you know, there was ways of, people didn't bother about this kind of making it in quotes. They wanted to play, and they were just, so Alfie said, you know, that about her life is that what she wanted was, she had sort of regular jobs, but she wanted to live a life whereby, you know, a free jazz life, if you like, you know, where she would improvise her life from day to day and make her own way through jaywalk through the traffic kind of thing. And it's a way to live. It's if you can make a living at it, that's great, you know. But to worry about, you know, how big the public is in comparison. I mean, obviously, people who set out. I mean, there are people. I mean, if you're talking about, for example, commercially successful music like, say, disco culture, well, people like Barry White and Isaac Hayes, who sort of at the forefront at the beginning of the kind of disco music, dance music thing, they would go and watch people dancing and time the beats of where everybody got up on the floor and danced. and they would fix the optimum beat. Very often it would be like 120 BPM to 120 beats per minute, and then deliberately go out and make tracks that were that speed. And you can actually, it's calculated apparently, by the time it got to the Spice Girls it got to 140, but it's all very, you know, calibrated, and that's a craft. If you're really concerned about you know, getting across to the public, don't start from your self-expression, start from them and find out what they want and kind of try and make it. That's a perfectly respectable thing to do. I think that if you can make a living out of it, you're lucky. If you can't, you're unlucky. But I don't think you can demand of the public. I mean, we're talking about, I mean, if you get this in perspective, I know this sounds a bit sort of flattening, but we're living in a world where half the world is running out of rice right now. The other half is worried about where it can't get any fresh water. They're getting diseases from pollution in Chinese rivers that they've never, in fishing communities that have been there for 2,000 years. There's serious problems out there, and I don't think the problems of avant-garde musicians earning a living is one of them. That's my opinion. Sorry. We have been in the same room together. When I say met, sounds a bit posh. Met. He was recording with I think a Russian tenor player, or was due to record when I was living in Twickenham, which was very near a bass player. It's a small recording studio. Christ, worked with Lenny Tristano, English bass player, wonderful. Had a stroke since. Help me, somebody.
Peter Ind.
Thank you so much. Peter Ind had a studio near us in Twickenham, where I'd done a bit of recording myself, and because I was local, somebody told me, probably Peter, that Sonny Murray was down there and to play, and I went down there to listen. It's a tiny little place, but the only kit that was there was a kit that was used mostly by local beat groups, you know, and it wasn't a satisfactory kit for him. You can't put an ostrich egg in a sparrow's basket, really. So in a nest. So Hunt was on for a proper drum kit, and hours went past, and somebody found out that right at the other end of London, there was John Stevens, God bless him, had his entire kit sent over for Sonny Murray to play. And but what was interesting was that while Sonny Murray was disconsolately flickering his way through this unsatisfactory rock kit, a bit like a child who'd got looking forward to a Christmas present and opening it, and it's something awful, you know, that he didn't really want, like, you know. But even his flickering was lovely. I mean, maybe I'm just projecting it, my romantic admiration for him, but just his flick of a brush on the cymbals and the way he moved around the kit, just trying stuff out, to me, it would have been great just to have heard him on that kit, you know. But there you are. Thank goodness for John Stevens, to give him a kit that he could play on happily. And that's my only personal memory of being in the same space as Sonny Murray at the same time. And it was very thrilling, really.